What's happening from New York City? I hope you're all staying safe and I hope you're all staying healthy again. I just shot a video which was a little broader picture of storytelling within delivering information, facilitating education, and in formatting education, actually. I talked about how and why people best retain information and stay engaged in what's being shared using storytelling. I talked a little bit about why storytellers draw us in so effectively, utilizing that oratory history that's all within our human shared DNA, actually. I shared a little bit about what a story arc is, which ultimately is about what this video is going to be about. And I'm going to really break that down to its individual components so that you can utilize it in a way that will actually make your education and your facilitation come to life. And I also shared a lot about why it's important and useful. The organic flow nature of it, the slow reveal nature of the emotional connection, and the changing rhythms. So without further ado, let's get into actually what the story arc is. So story arc, it's called a number of different things: hero's journey, story arc, and mind you, worth noting, depending on the length of what's going on and what needs to be shared, and you could see this in various novels throughout history, actually, there's a number of different kind of story arc formats, if you will. They all ultimately utilize the same components. They may call them by different names. They may add more individually specific elements behind them. The story arc that I'm going to share with you is the broad-based one that I actually utilize to format and facilitate my education when I'm delivering it to teams and to individuals, whoever I'm honored and privileged enough to serve. And it translates most easily from story, like novel story or fairy tale story, into your education story. Okay, so story arc. Element number one, exposition. All right. So in a story, what does this mean? Now the exposition, we're getting to know the characters. Where is it taking place? We're getting to know the landscape. We're starting to see a little bit of those interpersonal dynamics, which are going to kick into gear when the actual meat of the story is being told. All right. Now what this exposition means from an educational standpoint, this is ultimately, why are we here and what problems are we solving? All right. This is your intro. This is your what's in it for me. This is the introduction to what you'll be sharing and why it's important for the listener to hear it. Because ultimately, without this information, or with this information, people can get hyped and excited about what is to come. That is the purpose of an exposition. This exposition is meant to engage quickly so that then the rest of the story can be told with everyone's undivided attention and with retention of what's being shared or written about or what have you through the entire journey of your tale. All right. The next element that comes in this story arc, it's called rising action. All right. So from a story perspective, this is the way, follow me if you will. If we were reading a novel or a fairy tale or what have you, so first we would introduce all the characters, we would introduce the setting, we would start diving into, we would start introducing, not diving, we would start introducing certain relational elements between the characters or what have you. And then the story would move into the rising action. Something would happen. Something moves this story in a direction. And this ultimately is the journey or the adventure that is really the bulk of the story. All right. So from this perspective, when you're designing education and when you're facilitating education, this is actually the time when you're starting to dive into the meat of your program. This is your content and how it unfolds. And similarly to a story, I'll use haircutting as an example. I can use anything as an example. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. If I was using haircutting, let's see. I don't just start, okay, now grab your scissors and start cutting a bob. No, wait a second, right? When we talk about rising action, right, the very first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to make sure that we're sectioning the hair correctly. The very next thing we're going to do we need any prep products in there to actually execute our technique and make it easier? Next thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about body positioning. Then we're going to talk about hand positioning. Then we're going to talk about the tools that we're going to use. And now we start moving into the techniques. We start moving into the looks and techniques that we're that we're moving into sharing, that are relevant for the team, for the individuals that are standing in front of us. That's what that looks like from a haircutting perspective. If it was a business development program, think about how this unfolds. And if you notice, I look at all of this and it helps a lot. I look at it like a building. Like, what's first? What comes next? When you're formatting and facilitating your education, honestly, that question it has served me well for many years, and I'm sure it'll serve you. When you're at a place and you're like, whoa, what next? And you're like, just what comes next? If I was doing this, what comes next? And it'll help guide exactly the direction that you want to go in, right? And it'll make sense because you'll always have one foot in the familiar and you'll always have another foot reaching into the unfamiliar, just like a story. I know what I know because I just read it, but I don't know what's about to happen and what's to come. That's that anticipation element that keeps people engaged and enrolled in your program and helps them retain it, because the story that you're telling in your education is linear. All right? They can track it. The listener, the learner can track it in that respect because it makes logical, linear sense. All right? Makes it easier to comprehend and to retain. Now, the next element is called the climax. All right? Now, in a story, the climax is ultimately, okay, so I've gone through this journey and I've gone through that journey and all of this stuff has taken place, and now I stand victorious amidst and after all of my adventures and after all of my trials and tribulations. And I stand in this sort of a way, in leadership, as a king, as a queen, as a prince, as a whatever, as someone who brought their family out of poverty. This is the climax of the story, right? The result of ultimately all of the rising action. And consequently, in your education formatting, your climax, this is the result that comes from your content. So, if this was a haircutting class, I would have done my sectioning, I would have done my products, I would have done my actual haircutting technique. And when I say products first, I meant products that I might cut with, cutting lotions perhaps, and then it moves into the styling products, so that now we move into a finished look. And then when that look is finished and everybody has finished their haircut and blown it all out and it just looks fabulous, that is the climax of the content and the meat of your program. And that is that finished result. And that is ultimately where the victory lies. And the champion is revealed within every single person that's in your rooms, all right? Because they can feel that. That's their winning moment, all right? And that moment is so, so very important, just like it is in a great novel or a great story. Now, the next element, no, because it's not done yet. Because you don't just like show the haircut and everybody leaves the room. That's not the way education goes. That's not the way a story goes either. Because now after the climax, there's something called falling action, all right? So we have trials, tribulations, we have victory, and then in the end, okay, great. After that victory, how does this all settle in? What does life look like after, for these characters that you've been reading about in your story, if this was a novel or a fairy tale or what have you? Now we start looking at like what life looks like for these characters directly after this journey that they've taken, of ebbs and flows, of falls, starts, stops, all these various different things, to their final place of victory and success, or not, but to keep it in education, we're going to talk about success, not about the tragic story, different story arc, all right? But I will say that in that moment, then that's how people settle in. Lord of the Rings is a great example, right? I don't know if you've ever read this, but if you haven't, do. If not, watch the movie, and if not, well, here I'm going to give you a real like 3-sentence synopsis of it. These cats from all over this fantasy world, they take this gigantic adventure. They figure out this magic ring. They fight a dragon. All this other stuff happens, and then they make it back to what they call their hobbit holes, which is they're hobbits, and they live in these very peaceful type of surrounding and environment. And actually, it'll show in The Lord of the Rings, in book and in movie, after they've done all this dragon fighting and all this stuff, it shows them actually now, okay, now we're back home. And now I'm getting my home back together. What's happening with my garden? Let's plant some tomatoes. Whatever the hell's going on with that, that's that part of it, so you can see the reintegration of the characters into normal life. right? And we've all experienced it. So what does this mean for you from an educational standpoint? Your falling action is where your final questions are. That's where you close any loops. And that's where you'll anchor your three main takeaways that you think are most important for all of your attendees to walk away from, given the information that you've just shared. All right, that's your falling action, making sure that everybody's complete. We've done all of this work. Do you have any questions about how this was cut? Any last ones? Did I miss anything? Do we all understand the products? Do you see? Now we're settling in to the end result of the amazing content that you've all been able to share. And then lastly, in our story arc, if this was a novel or a fairy tale, we have our resolution, all right? And our resolution, this is that statement at the end of every story. It's that, and so they lived on happily ever after. That's a resolution statement, all right? And in that same vein, right, because now it leaves, we've begun properly with the exposition and we've ended properly with a resolution, right? Just like a story. And that's the way education is best received and best retained. And now in this resolution piece for us as educators, this looks like, this is your call to action to the team. Great. So you just learned all this stuff. If you want to learn something, the surest way to learn something is to teach it. So my call to action to each and every single one of you, because I know some of you team members weren't available to attend this workshop in this haircutting class, I have to tell you, go next day when they're available, pull them aside and actually share with them a little bit of what you've learned today. It'll help you retain it, right? That's a call to action, we'll say, one of many, but just an example, all right? It's also where you invite your attendees to stay connected with you. This is your hashtags that you're gonna use, social media, where's your website? How do I peep what you're up to, and how do I stay engaged with you, not just as a business, but as a person, yeah? And that's that moment, that just closes it all up, all right? So that you're not truly saying goodbye, but you're saying see you later, right? Because in our business, just like a great book, when it ends, I don't know if any of you have experienced this. If you love reading, worth noting, or if you love listening to audiobooks, people like stories no matter what, right? So whatever format you take that in, you know, when you turn that last page, it's like you feel a loss. You want to keep going with the story when it's a great story, right? And this is the resolution to your program, right? We wished it could keep on going, but we need it to come to a resolution. And we need you to feel as though this journey of education continues on without us. Remember, and so they lived happily ever after, right? Right? Even though the book is done, it's intimated that their life journey continues without our presence and without our engagement and without our knowledge. It's the same thing with your education. Now, one last trick, and this is the secret sauce. This is the saison that you'll sprinkle over all of your education and all of your formats. The real trick is through stories, through information, through ebbs and flows, through attendees' shares, through their stories, through their victories, through their triumphs. The trick is to meld all of these elements together so that you're not sure when one of them ends and one of them begins, just like a story. As you can see, when you deliver education as a story, it's not so factual. It's not so boom, 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 fact, 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 fact. It's very hard, as I said in my other video, to actually separate the different elements when they all have the same rhythm and the same cadence and the same, and now I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you this. It's like, God, by the time you tell me the fifth thing, I forgot what you told me in the first thing, right? But when you have a different mood, a different energy, a different rhythm, a different context as your education or as your story moves on, it's easier for the listener to place the gold that you actually shared with them during your events. All right, everybody. I hope that you found this useful. You know, anybody that knows me knows that I love reading. And I have to tell you, the reading that I've done has definitely served me so well in the education that I facilitate and that I format and design. And I'm not intimating that you need to be an avid and voracious reader like myself to be able to deliver and facilitate amazing education. Not the case at all. However, to understand the way people retain information best, to understand the way a successful story is told, and to be able to translate those elements into what will become your education formats and your education programs and your facilitation as you're sharing all of the knowledge that you can with the team and making sure that they're giving you feedback so that you're delivering what they want as well. This is the magic that really makes education really come to life, really pop. And one last example. Frequently in elementary school, high school, you get a lot of facts. And that's why so many of us actually don't have a good time learning there, because it's not presented in the way of a story. It's presented in the way of assignments. It's presented in the way of this fact follows this fact follows this fact. And it's presented in a way that actually is pretty monochromatic in the sense of rhythms, energies, and flow. All right? Cool. All right, everybody. I hope that you found this useful. I hope you took some notes. And next time you facilitate your education, give it a shot. Design your program in this fashion. Facilitate it with this type of flow. And do me a favor, drop me an email right here on this platform. Go to my website, in fact, www.urestyle.com, and drop me a quick note, because I want to celebrate your victory after utilizing this tool that ultimately has served me so well. All right, everybody, have an amazing rest of your day. Take care, stay healthy, and like I do with every video, later. Have a great day.